I'm reminded years ago of a United States senator who said the following to me: your home is your castle, but your automobile is your freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about dispensing freedom. Cars give us freedom.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Episode number 11 of The Wheelhouse. And introducing our panel today, we're joined by Matthew Haiken, retailer principal at the Prestige Collection Auto Group. Don Hall, president and CEO of the Virginia Auto Dealers Association. I believe that's, again, the first time that we've had actual presidents on our show. So I'm very thankful for you joining us today. And of course, Michael Hayes, NADA Academy chair. And joining us for The Wheelhouse on episode number 11, we've got this panel. And then just to quickly remind everyone, as we are proud to be the only show on ASOTU with our own disclaimer that the opinions and comments made in the Wheelhouse segment are solely those of the individuals expressing them, and they do not necessarily represent the views of ASOTU, its affiliates, or the speakers, companies, or their affiliates. All right, now we get that out of the way. Let's get to the fun part, and we're going to go around the horn 60 seconds for each. And since we've got such a great representation from automotive franchise foundations, then I'd like to ask each one of you, what's the future in the near future? What is the near future of automotive retail franchise ownership? And what's the biggest challenge to automotive franchises in the next year or so? And Matt, let's start with you, since you live that on your skin every day.
Wow. Well, first of all, I mean, it's very confusing. So dealerships are transacting at crazy valuations. I don't know if you saw the one recently in South Florida to Coach Saban for over $700 million to Mercedes stores. So dealerships are still transacting at crazy prices, but at the same time, the OEMs are looking at agency models, looking to cancel franchise agreements and contracts, and they're using EV as a tool to thin the herd and handpick the dealers that they want to invest. So it's really unknown. Challenges for any operator come down to people and teams, and it always will, and it's never going to change. But right now we're in a place where we don't know. We don't know. We'll make it, but we don't know what the future holds for us.
That's what I bring you on here for, is that clarity. So thank you for that. I'm glad to hear that somebody else sort of feels similarly. Okay, let's Michael Hayes, from your perspective, as you see a lot of franchise owners and staff members and management coming through the academy, how do you see it?
Yeah, well, exactly. Matt pretty much highlighted a lot of the things, and as you mentioned earlier, it's all about the people, which is kind of what we focus on as it is. But, these are all things that the automotive retailers have dealt with for 115 years. I think what's really changed is technology just speeds up how quickly we have to adapt. And I don't think anybody would doubt that. And so it's the speed of change, I think, that happens, and getting the right people to do it. So other than the regulations, which I assume Don's going to hit and everything like that, the cost to get into it, to stay into it, is huge. I guess we don't need to still remember, though, that there's 280 million, I think, vehicles on the road, of which about 270 million of those are internal combustion engines. We're still going to have a lot of them. So there still is a really, really good future for dealers, whichever way that we go. But we do have to make a lot of decisions. And we are seeing people think long and hard about what's the return on this $500,000 or $1 million for me to continue or to start selling EVs, which I don't have very many of them yet. And a lot of big decisions. I think that leads to a reduction in our total dealer principal owner base. Certainly more consolidation.
Perfect. All right. Okay, Don, and your 1 minute is on the clock. Go ahead.
I think it's an exciting time to be in the business right now because of consolidation, frankly, and all the various tools that are available to us to get better at giving the consumer a great buying experience. I'm reminded years ago of a United States senator who said the following to me: your home is your castle, but your automobile is your freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about dispensing freedom. Cars give us freedom. People still want to be free to go wherever they want to go on the weekends, at night, live, and so forth. So what a great industry. Consolidation is our friend. It is the future. We will not stop it, embrace it along with technology, and a great opportunity for people to excel within that future, within that growth that's taking place. And yes, as Michael said, regulations are important. Associations' purpose in life is to make sure the dealers are protected, that there's a level playing field, that consumers benefit, that dealers benefit in their local communities, not just the manufacturers. And we'll talk later on, I'm sure, about the agency model, what's going on in Europe. European model as well, and how that pertains to dealers in the United States.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so let's jump into just a couple of headlines. Is this going to relate to kind of our main topic today? So the first thing is we've got Mercedes-Benz chooses the coolest collaboration I could ever think of, Buccees, as being their charging network partner. So they're going to install Mercedes-Benz charging stations at each Buccees that they have, particularly in the, if you're not from the Southeast or you haven't visited and you've never been to one of these, the just absolute Smithsonians of convenience stores. But the interesting thing is like they're in a market that's not a big adopter of EVs. Is this genius? Is this something? Is this how manufacturers are going to be supporting their own charging networks now? Is this a gimmick? What other things do we think we're going to be seeing? And because you wouldn't really think Mercedes-Benz and Buccees would necessarily have this partnership, but Matt, I know you've got some fleet of electrics, and you don't have a Buccees up by you. So
I don't.
Is it going to be
Can
Volvo?
I just say one thing? I'm the only, besides UDG, I'm the only dealer today. It's very intimidating, but those intros were amazing, amazing. So, who knows? I mean, who knows how this partnership came about? You're going to see so much of this, and again, as more people get into the EV, start driving an EV, they really need to wrap their head around, how do I charge? How fast do I charge? The fact that I don't fill it up, I only go 80%. I guess it's an awareness play, but who knows? Right now, we're sitting on so many EVs, all we're thinking about is getting them off our lots.
So I mean, is this how we raise the public awareness for how to charge EVs, is by joining with big commercial ventures? Michael, I mean, you've got a big EV background. Is this something that you saw coming?
No, absolutely. I'm not a fanboy of Elon Musk by any stretch, but one thing he really did well was address this before he started selling a whole lot of cars. He had all kinds of charging stations and easy ways to overcome a lot of people's trepidation about charging before they sold big numbers of cars. And realistically, that's probably led to their success. They were planning on that early on. And I think, as bad a rollout as Ford had, I think that was kind of Farley's deal, was if I can have 3,000 Ford dealers having 5 or 6 plugs apiece, and we can help overcome some of these trepidations that I'm sure a lot of people feel.
And then Don, I wanted to ask you, where there's Mercedes-Benz, for example, has a dealer network. Why do we need why is there a convenience store network that's going to make this more beneficial to the manufacturer?
Well, remember right now, first of all, this whole EV subject is about politics. Politics is driving this. Nothing else is driving it but that. The manufacturers are under tremendous pressure to be in compliance in the CARB states as well as the federal rules as well. Charging stations are key because people have range anxiety, as we all know.
I mean, but can I just say, it makes sense to partner with Buccees versus partner with your local car dealership that's probably already stressed out on space with used car exposure, driving as much car to our service departments. I mean,
well, it's not one or the other. I'm saying it's both, right?
No, of course. But I mean, it makes sense if you're going to have a coffee, have a slice of pizza. I don't know Buccees. I'm in the Northeast. What's their claim to fame as far as?
But Matthew, if I can, real quick, most dealers have fought against the idea of having public charging stations at their dealership. You can argue it either way. And so again, there's this need to take away range anxiety, and the more you've got, the better. And frankly, part of it is because the people that drive Teslas, and there's a lot of them in Virginia, they want to go someplace and get that cup of coffee and relax. And Buccees is sort of this unique experience when you do it. Handing out at a dealership, unfortunately, for many, is not their desire. At the same time, we're not prepared to have loads of people just sort of hanging around a dealership. Now, positively, we can also turn those into sales, and that would be part of my argument if we're really smart about it as well.
All right, let's jump into our next one here. Specifically, we've seen a few articles all the time, but definitely concentration in the past 2 weeks about the depreciation of EV and luxury vehicles, and the double whammy. If it happens to be a luxury EV vehicle, seems to even fare even worse than either of them on their own. So we got a Forbes article here that lists out exactly how much money, at least, that you would lose if you were to purchase into any of these vehicles. We've got some separate articles, specifically, we know with Tesla, upwards of $40,000 in 1 year of ownership, based off of some different, what they can do with their pricing. Is that is the argument for the financial investment for the future, does this not also have to make sense in the present day for this to be a compelling argument? Why are these vehicles facing bigger depreciation than their counterparts?
Oh, if I may,
I've said it several times, right? So new EVs are built for leasing. If you're going to write a check for a brand new EV, you need your head examined, especially when a certified EV is going for 50% off window sticker. And really, I think a lot of that has to do with the changes that came from IRA. You know, leasing now is an automatic 7,500. I would say 80 to 90% of the manufacturers are passing that on to consumers. There's no income caps for it, and it's a better hedge. So in these lease markets, you know, you need to lease an EV. In these markets that are not used to leasing, I think they're going to have to get back to the basics and educate their consumers why EVs are built
Yeah,
for
just leasing it doesn't mean there's not depreciation. It just means someone else is eating the depreciation and you're still paying for it somehow. I mean,
Well,
you're not.
you'd be crazy though to write a check for one of these cars with everything changing.
I'm not saying write a check. Michael, go ahead. You started to say something.
yeah, well, I was just going to say that, anytime I see the number stat when they say a $40,000 difference, first of all, that's a statistician taking a very small number of vehicles. When you look at the real volume of Tesla, and Tesla's driving this whole market, I think we agree. So when you look at the volume vehicles they sell, Tesla 3s and Tesla Ys, those have not depreciated $40,000 worth. In fact, their value isn't too bad. The people I've heard complaining about it, dealers who went out and bought them at the sale, paid almost full new sticker for it, and then when they dropped the price of their ones like $7,000 or $8,000, it took a hit. Well, the same thing would have happened and did happen to people who bought no Silverados, used Silverados for what they would buy, MSRP, and then didn't sell them right
Oh,
away.
but the MSRPs themselves changed though, right? I mean, let's talk about a Model X dual motor.
Yeah, well, Model X. So how many of those do they sell? 2,000 a year versus 150 to 200,000 3s and 200,000 Ys. So let's look at the real numbers. The X for sure is $135,000 car that dropped to 40,000 for sure. A really limited number though. So I'm really much more concerned about the 40, 50, $60,000 car than the person who can afford a $140,000 car.
I honestly, I would take Tesla completely off the table, and I'd look at what's actually going through the sale at Manheim when it comes to luxuries like BMWs and Mercedes and Volvos and Hyundais and Kias and Polestars. I mean, those are the cars that are running through the sale now that nobody is touching at 50% MSRP.
Mhm.
And I don't know why, but
That's my question. So why?
yeah,
I mean,
wow.
why did they face why? I mean, this is a tangible thing, right? Like, why do people? I think when I was going to the auction, they would call it the cooler, right? Like the car came through, and all of a sudden the lane got really cool. Everyone had somewhere to go. Everyone had something to do. I had to go check out the guy that was, in the cafeteria, or make a phone call, or see a man about a dog. But I wasn't buying that car. Why is this commonplace? More
Well, I mean,
commonplace.
a big part of it too is remember that consumers aren't beating down the dealerships to get their EV. And I'm concerned about these residuals. I mean, what are they going to look like based on what we're seeing right now as well? And so it's understandable, but I also would say this, it's new. And as we get into the next subject, talking about the Washington Post and its article, I mean, it's new, but there's no question as an industry, we've got to make sure we've got a positive spin on these things because they're not going to go away. And if there's going to be a bailout someday, and I predict there will be, of OEMs who have committed a lot for EVs, car dealers will not be bailed out, unfortunately. It'll be the OEMs bailed out. So we've got to be careful in this process and how we conduct ourselves and how we feel about EVs to begin with. The reality is people will grow to accept them. I do drive an EV, VW ID4, and also I have the privilege of driving something much nicer, which is an ICE vehicle. And I will tell you, for around town commuting, it's a wonderful vehicle. My wife likes it. It's a wonderful vehicle for around town driving. I wouldn't want to go to New York State, where she's from, in an EV right now because of range anxiety. But there are opportunities. I think a lot of this will be self-curing in time. A little ugly right now, but it will be self-curing in time.
I'm going to make one more point, right? So on the new car side of things, these cars are the most incentivized cars in the marketplace. The manufacturers got the residuals, the rates, the rebates, the IRA, all the incentives. The true feel for demand is the pre-owned side. So there is demand, but at what value? And that really tells the story when these cars really sell at a certain price point and consumers are buying them. that shows you that where they are from a supply and demand point
Right.
of view.
And consumers are buying. I think what, like the Dale Pollock version of what you're saying is like whether it's a true market or an artificial market, and a pre-owned market without incentives is more of
True
a true
market,
market.
true
My
market.
point exactly from that though is like I don't really want to think that the reason that I don't have a lot of very aggressive leasing programs on ICE vehicles is because the manufacturer is so stretched on what it has to do for EV vehicles and it cannot do both at the same time. Then that I think is a little bit bothersome, but we'll come back to that in sort of the main
And
thing.
and we could really double click on that, because then, they're going to come after our margins and say, due to the investment we need to make in our EV future, dealers are making too much. We need to attack their margins. We need you to pay for this. We need you to pay for this because we need to compete in the EV future. And then they're going to constantly benchmark, well, Tesla's margin is this and our margin is this. So the street doesn't value our price per share until we have this margin. And they're going to come after us to make up for it.
Daniel, one other quick point that can't
Sure.
be lost on people, and that is, remember where the pressure is coming from. No, it's not demand in the marketplace for these vehicles. The pressure is coming from bureaucrats out of California. There are about, I think, 16 or 17 states now that are CARB states, Virginia being one of them, New York, as Matthew knows, being one of them, and many other states, including California, obviously, Minnesota, and some other states. And so that pressure, if they don't, they're being heavily penalized, and they don't have the ability to buy the credits or sell the credits like they used to. So now what's happened is they have to sell these cars. That is the commitment, and they're doing so because of pressure from California and the federal government. This is not because we're demanding it. And so again, one more time, elections have consequences. No matter how nice or how great we think they are, the reality is that's why we're doing what we're doing today, not because we demand it.
I had this crazy thought this morning while I was waiting.
Wait, hang on. You're gonna have your crazy thought in another minute. Hang on. I'm glad all your crazy thoughts are back. Hang on. Okay, we got to this is the main event is coming up. All right. I want to point out that the state of New York was trying really hard. We just talked about New York being a state that's trying to be progressive, and they were trying really hard to make as many vehicles as they could EV from even a state and a municipal status. So they have, what do they have? They have a lot of snow plows. And they said, all right, snow plows could be EVs. That makes sense. Maybe they were like, has a lot of low end torque. And I think that would make a great snow plow. Maybe they saw the electric snow plows that, they were for sale at like Home Depot and Lowe's. And then 2 years into the program, they said, no, never mind. We're going to do EV. We like the idea of EVs. We're going to do something real similar. It's a diesel. And they're just going to be all diesel, and we're not even trying to pick up an EV snowplow anymore. And then, so is this now? Do we have municipal fleets that are also? Is this the first? This is a harbinger of municipal fleets turning away from having an EV solution to their fleets and what they need. So our cities turning away from this also. And how does that make you feel as a consumer?
Yeah, I don't think they're turning away from it necessarily. I think some things are just dumb to think about. You can do it with an EV right now, anyways, because of the weight. And that was the thing, these were garbage trucks that they were going to put plows on in the winter. Okay, so that's what that's what they're doing. So EVs make perfect sense for all those municipal items where I know I make a route on a constant basis. I know exactly how big a battery I have to have. Now, if I'm going to add 12 hours of plowing to my normal 6 or 7 or 8 hour garbage route, all bets are off now. And I think that's the issue. EVs make great sense for that low speed stop and go stuff. That's exactly what they were designed for. That internal combustion engines, including diesels, are not necessarily designed for. But the problem is that we have forced it in certain areas, Don kind of mentioned this, that don't necessarily make a lot of financial sense. There are all kinds of people, all kinds of uses for EVs that make perfect sense, fleet side, municipal side, and everything else. We just keep focusing on ones that don't make sense. I mean, to put plows on one right up the front when they've got 1,000 other areas I can do is just dumb. But, there's a whole lot of ways you can do better. There are so many opportunities that we haven't even attacked yet.
Why didn't anyone tell them it was dumb then?
Yeah, you're right. I would have told them it was dumb if they'd asked me.
I think any local municipality would say, I don't think this is going to work, as they're waiting for the snow, the heavy bouts of snow while they're charging.
Are you going to use an electric snowblower, Matt, at the dealership?
No, I don't think that would work. I think we'd be paralyzed. We'd be paralyzed. I met with our town officials just on installing chargers, and they're still scratching their heads where they're going to install them, how they're going to pay for them.
I just want to say that I'm glad that we have cranky Haiken back. that you've come back to us.
I am not
You were a
cringe.
little too calm in a previous episodes, so but this is what we needed back. All right, let's get into the ring now. So we have what I like. I just think we got to call them narratives. They're like currents that different forces want to tell the story of EVs differently. So, and it's started because looking at news articles related to EVs, and just what we've talked about so far today, we have just a boatload of issues that we're working out. And then the Washington Post publishes an article saying that and they're not the only ones, saying that the roadblock to EV adoption are the actual auto dealers themselves.
Crazy. That is crazy. First
So
of all,
let me
auto
chat on
dealers
that.
are entrepreneurs that will sell anything. That's what we are. We're creative. We love to sell things, and that's why we're successful. And we've made it through wars and market crashes and everything. You know, we are right on the front lines. We live a 30-day cycle. We know what customers want, and we're advocates for our customers. So that is just totally false. I think maybe the auto manufacturer lobby is pushing that because they want to get rid of us, and that's a fact.
So Matthew, let me say, I appreciate what you just said as a dealer, but you're saying that from a much higher level. Let's go down into the trenches to those who work on them and those who sell them. And the reality is what's being said out there is, oh no, you don't want to go EV. You want to go with what I've got on the lot here, an ICE vehicle. That's what you want to do. Look, I've got that article right here. It is what scares the hell out of me representing car dealers, is the OEMs want to make the argument federally. We don't need franchise laws that prevent us from selling direct. We want to sell direct because look at what these salespeople say when they do blind studies and they do mystery shoppers and so forth. So what's happened is in the old days, and I go back in this business more than 40 years, we had demos. Today, you don't have people who even drive these cars except on a demo drive. And so they don't believe in the product. They don't understand the product, and people aren't clamoring for the product. No matter what we're involved in right now, we have to have a game face of saying the following. EVs are part of our world. And as Matthew said, and amen, brother, you're right. We'll sell anything we've got. And so, Mr. Manufacturer, Mr. President, Mr. Senator, Mr. Congressperson, we're all about selling whatever we have on our lot. Now, you've got to make EVs such where we get rid of range anxiety and so forth. But as an industry, if we don't play this right, the OEMs are going to use this against us. And we've got to make sure that people in the trenches have got a positive spin and a positive attitude about the future of EVs and what they are. Because the reality is, them's the cards we've been dealt, and we got to deal with those cards.
Yeah, and I think we see a lot of different things when they have different dealers from around North America. A lot of it depends on where they live and what they do. I mean, in the Northeast, Matthew, I think, and around New York, where you have some levels of EV penetration in particular areas. Here in DC, we've got a lot of areas of EV penetration. Absolutely. We look at California with 25% EV penetration last quarter across the state, much less in Orange County. There are dealerships that absolutely all in bought in on this, but there's a lot of dealers that, haven't really sold an EV yet and haven't really done it yet. So they aren't really getting people involved in it. Not all of them, but there's always a few that kind of are holding back, but that's not news. It shouldn't be. Well, I guess it is news in those areas, but I don't think that happens in areas where EVs make sense. And again, I went back to areas where it makes sense is fine. A dealer in Wyoming, I'm not so sure too many EVs are going to work out there right now until we do have better, charging, public charging, everything else. However, it makes perfect sense where I live. It makes perfect sense where Don lives for at least one of the 2 or 3 household vehicles that the average household in America has. And if we focus along those areas, but I totally agree with you. It wouldn't surprise me. Certain companies are trying to get dealers out of the market that are promoting this a little bit more than they probably should. But we as dealers need to step up and tell them, yeah, we're here to sell these things. We're here to promote them and everything else. Because
on the attitude survey, I mean, how big of an issue was that on the attitude on the last 2 attitude surveys?
Well, that's a great point. And from a dealership point of view, the companies that aren't doing as well with them are certainly down to things. Ford is certainly not that rated highly because of the way they've done it. Mercedes isn't that rated highly because of the way they've done it. So you're hitting a couple of those areas there that certainly have had more struggles.
But it's not about the product or the EV. It's the fact that they're using it as a crutch to thin the herd of the network.
I think you're right.
There is truth to that.
And we need to combat any article thinks that dealers are the roadblock. I mean, we need to go on the total offensive.
No, we are, because we
is
didn't.
Crazy.
Nathan didn't tell you this yet, but the next episode of People More Than Cars is actually we're taking you and a camera crew down to the Washington Post offices. And we're just following along. But gentlemen, I mean, since I've got the experts here, like let me ask you, gentlemen, though, explain to some of us, right, that have been sort of living along in the automotive retail world, and all of a sudden there's this big pressure, right, and that we have to sell these EVs. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, as in most things that the government is involved in, was there not some type of calculation that maybe moved a decimal point and all of a sudden something became like miles per gallon weren't as what they were being calculated at before? And so now we need to sell more EVs. I mean,
let me explain again one more time. Elections have consequences. Right now, the environmentalists are in control of much, whether you agree or disagree. And EVs were a product of that coming out of California. That's where it all started. And as a result, after 36 years of being a registered lobbyist and working with politicians, they're great people, but at the end of the day, they're going to support where they think they're going to get their support. And the fact is, we've got this electric train driving us down the avenue to sell EVs. They don't believe us as an industry, car dealers, and those of us who love this business day in and day out, as being credible. So we've got to work on that story, not by people like yourself, but by the people in the trenches. And at the end of the day, if we've done all those things and these articles don't exist, like the Washington Post said, then we can make the argument it's because of the following reasons, not because we refuse to sell them. It's because we don't have infrastructure in place, because they are too expensive, because the batteries are going to cost us a ton of money after 4 or 5 years of driving them. And oh, by the way, we're not even sure how to evaluate the value of those cars 4 or 5 years from now. And those are things that have got to be addressed, but current politicians ignore that in order to appease a particular sector in the marketplace.
So, to be fair, there are a lot of companies that are working on a lot of things you're talking about. We certainly aren't there yet. I don't know we are, but there are a lot of ways that we're doing this. And I think the fact that they're going to have common standards for the OBD2 or whatever you want to call that for EVs, to be able to have a common way to gauge battery health, which is everything, as you say. I will say this, though. I am quite frankly surprised from being in this 17 years ago, how good the batteries are on some of the better vehicles. They're lasting far longer than we ever expected in 2006, 7, 8, 9, and 10. I mean, really, far longer. And it isn't about the mileage. It's about how well they're charged, how well they're cared for. And the other thing I want to throw about EVs is this. EVs aren't going away. Maybe the way that we do them and how the speed is good. EVs make perfect sense. I think everybody likes driving an electric vehicle. I mean, the power is great. Whether it's going to be always with a battery, or whether it's going to be a combination of a fuel cell someday, or whether it's going to be resistors or capacitors, there's a multitude of ways to fuel it. We just have to get there. But I think EVs is where everything's going to end up for a couple of reasons. We can make electricity 15 different ways, and we can only make fossil fuels one way. And that's the end result from 10, 15, 20 years from now. How quickly we get there is everything. But that's what's driving this.
Give me one thing. I'm a young sales manager at a dealership, and I'm hearing all, the pros and cons on EVs and a lot of cons, but I have them here, and that's in a lot of cases, that's what I have to sell, right? Give me one simple thing I can do at the dealership to start turning myself towards that better and my sales team towards that better.
You need to get people to, I think, drive the car.
An
EV, you cannot sell an EV virtually or over the phone. If someone has never driven a car and experienced the instant torque, the one pedal driving, and the quietness of the vehicle, and if they're all about software, there's nothing else to consider. They're hooked on one drive.
Get your salespeople excited about the cars, not a 5-minute demo drive or 10-minute with a customer, but get them excited about it. Put some in loaner service. Let them drive them. Let them get the fever, because again, we're not going to have a choice at some point. It's what you've got in front of you, and not a lot of ICE vehicles available to you as it is.
And I think the fever is driving it. Matthew, that really hasn't changed much in the last 100 years or so, has it? The fever driving the car. I mean, isn't that what we've done?
No, I mean, I support the idea of putting them into loaner service. I think it varies by manufacturer, because the support that you get as the market changes, as we know, the daily rate that you get on your loaner vehicles has very little to do with what the market is just in general. But as we've covered before, and I'm not making any financial suggestions to anybody, but just as we've covered before, that these vehicles tend to depreciate faster than other counterparts. When you put them into loaner, if you already don't have a sufficient daily rate, understand, as Don said, that not only elections have consequences, but putting cars into loaner cars service also has consequences. And you may look at that with caution. I mean, for what it's worth, yeah, they do need to drive them, but also understand that that's an additional investment. I just want that to be recognized. That's an additional investment on the dealer part to put these into loaner car service for the expense that they're going to be operating off of them. But so let me just, and the debate was so good, I didn't want to slow anybody down and announce the points. So I have them written here, and I'm just going to finish adding them up here. And so we've got Matt with 87 points today, just shy of 100, but a big uptick from some prior performances. Thank you so much. And Michael Hayes, 105. Very impressive first showing. Thanks very much. And it was such a close tie. Don Hall, 114 points on today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us. So you get to then answer a few rapid fire questions. We're going to load up the clock with 20 seconds. All right. So if we got 20 seconds on the clock and we can get started, what are you most excited for at the 2024 NADA show?
To see the people there and see them get enthusiastic about what's going on in the industry and all the opportunities for all of us.
Are you listening to Christmas music yet?
Not yet and won't.
What do you think is a course that NADA Academy should have that doesn't have yet?
Probably how to feel more empathy for people and understand where people are coming from in terms of how they feel about buying a car. We get jaded sometimes because of our experiences.
That was a rapid fire, but that was a great answer there. And Michael, you're clapping. Is that something that we can?
Well, just say we have an EV course we'll be introducing right away. We did it with a Center for Sustainable Energy, and I think you'll be pretty pleased. But it's going to be an online thing for salespeople and stuff to kind of get them excited and talk about it. So.
Are you going to have Matt on there? Can he be a guest speaker?
Absolutely.
Matt, and I will have Matt help promote it. Matt's going to be the first one to buy it. You kidding me?
Oh,
you guys know I'm a Polestar dealer, right? I sell EVs all day long.
Matt, I rented a Polestar 2 weeks ago. When I always rent an EV when I go out and stuff like that. And I actually had a Polestar last year for three weeks and drove it. I think it's a hell of a car.
Matt, did you have any crazy idea burning desires that you didn't get to?
No, I had this crazy thought this morning. I'm waiting for my car. And there's like 6 plug-in hybrids. There's a Jeep. I'm driving a plug-in hybrid Volvo. There's a plug-in hybrid BMW. And I'm thinking to myself, what percentage of these plug-in hybrids have never been plugged in? And I'm like, I bet you it's like 80 to 90% of these people in New York City that have plug-in hybrids that never got plugged in. And then I was like, can they track that? It might be a privacy issue, but maybe they should be tracking it. And how much investment and money did we put into these plug-in hybrids for them never to get plugged in? And that was my thought.
Was that your happy thought for the day? We need to work on those.
It was. What percentage of plug-in hybrids never get plugged in?
Guys, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of The Wheelhouse, and we will see everybody again in another 2 weeks with all a new panel and all new topics of things that matter to us every day in automotive retail. Thanks so much for our guests for joining us today. Look forward to seeing everybody in another couple of weeks. Thanks, guys.